Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here. Today I'm looking at the 80th anniversary celebration of Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, published, I say dwarves because I love J.R.R. Tolkien, but in Disney it's actually dwarfs. Huh. Dwarves! I'm going to say dwarves probably in this vid, but this is published by Joe Books, who also have done the Darkwing Duck comics. I think Joe Books picks up the Disney licenses that no one else is interested in. IDW goes after the hot numbers like DuckTales, and Joe Books goes after everything else. And this one was written by Regis Main, art by Santiago Barriera. And I guess most of my quibbles are with Regis Main, because the whole time I'm reading this comic adaptation, it just makes me want to go watch the Disney movie Snow White because of how well paced that movie is. And this comic adaptation suffers from pacing. I think Santiago Barriera gives a laudable effort to bring the story of the movie into comics and pumping it up in scenes like this where he gives us a nice big opening shot of a fantasy castle. I see scenes from the movie as I go through this, so I'm sure that Barriera is looking at movie stills for inspiration, but he's got a lot of life and energy. So in terms of the art, this is a good adaptation of the movie, but I can't really warmly recommend this. Maybe if you are a big fan of the Snow White movie, I think you'll enjoy this. If you just love the Snow White tale, I think you'll still enjoy this, but this pales in comparison to the movie, so maybe it's an interesting little case study for what could you do better to adapt such a classic movie into comics and maybe even make the comic work better. I almost love the comic adaptation by Dark Horse of Star Wars: A New Hope even more than the movie. Maybe that's some high. That's not to dig Star Wars: A New Hope. That's to praise how good the Dark Horse comic adaptation is. This one, everything's verbose. So look at the mask. I remember in the mask he rhymes and he'll say, the Snow White is the fairest in the land. 'Tis a heart of a pig you hold in your hand. And he's so creepy in how he's painted. And this, he's sort of like a millennial in how he speaks. But now there's someone else whose features are perfect, whose eyes are adorable, and tell me. Punchy, get punchy. If they had tightened up the dialogue throughout a lot of this, they would have had enough time to maybe even add like a little extra fun scene or something. Like the deleted scene from the DVDs where they sing about Snow White soup or something. You can see the concept art of that on YouTube, I think, or on the DVD specials. But the other thing about the movie is the movie's a musical, and it's not a big musical with a lot of song and dance numbers, but it has a few little songs that are paced appropriately. They come kind of like right at the right moment. And I guess my thesis for this video is Snow White and the Seven Dwarves is a boss movie. You think it's chintzy because they've got like all the little fuzzy animals flying around? Holy crumb! That movie holds up, and it's because of the pacing. Maybe it's because I've watched it so many times, but all of those scenes, every time I watch them, it's like they're hitting all the right moments. Snaps trigger warning, guys. But they had a feel for the rhythm of storytelling, the rhythm of music, the rhythm of the soundtrack, and they blended it all into the whole in that movie. And this comic pales compared to that. I wish they hadn't gone with Snow White's like 1930s flapper, Betty Boop, to rotoscope look. The reason that Snow White looks very different than all the other Disney princesses is they rotoscoped her based on an actress. So she has the actress's features and kind of small eyes. She doesn't have the big doe-eyed look of later Disney princesses. And I would think a comics adaptation would be a good chance to update her look a little bit and make her look a little more consistent with other Disney princesses. They do some cute stuff where she's a little embarrassed because she was daydreaming out loud, and that's when the prince catches her. So it's almost like Snow White is aware that she's acting like a little girl as she's daydreaming about Prince Charming coming to save her. And they changed the plot a little where it's not the mirror telling the evil queen that makes her want to kill Snow White. It's hearing the prince court her and say she's the fairest in the land that triggers the wicked queen and makes her want to kill Snow White. So here's what I'm talking about. So she gets the huntsman, and she threatens to kill his family if he doesn't bring her the heart of Snow White in a box. And it's got a picture on it with a knife stabbing through a heart. So without showing you the huntsman stabbing Snow White through the heart, cutting out her heart, and bringing it to the queen in a box. This story for kids is giving you this powerful visual idea. It's terrifying. And then the huntsman has this great breakdown where he's just about to stab her, but then he has his moral conscience speaks and he can't do it. And you can hear the delivery of the actor in your head, and as he's collapsing and burying his face in his hands. I can't do it. And then he gets animated and he tells her to run away. And every time he says something like run, hide, the music starts coming in. Ba-dum, ba-dum, and then it goes into ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That great soundtrack. The movie works. It's paced. This, it's that problem of telling us everything as we can just look at the picture to see it. I think this is a kind of amateur author mistake of trying to put words on almost every panel. And then it gets, she wakes up, she meets the animals, she realizes she was a bit silly to be that scared. She comes home and says, whoever it is needs a lesson in tidiness, whoever these funny little children are. Jordan D. Peterson approved. Tidy your room, guys. I'm one to talk. I'm not going to show you. That's how bad my room is. And then the dwarves. So the dwarves, they give them a little extra dialogue to show some of their personality, but in the movie, it's musical. Ding, 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 ding. The rhythm of their work goes right into their song, and then right into hi-ho, hi-ho. It's off to work we go. You might be able to get this extra kind of dialogue and slapstick to play on screen, but every page I feel like, okay, this is kind of fun. It's, nicely drawn. I think the color's a little bit too bright and kids booky. There's too much white mixed in with all the colors, but this is primarily a fault of the writer for me not getting very invested in this. And if they had tightened it up, they could have done a whole little original bit or something. Maybe they could have added a few bits from the Grimm version of the fairy tale that were left out of the Disney version. Maybe they were limited in what they could do, and they could only do the movie story beat for beat. But this is good. So the artist, we're seeing the artist do things with the characters, leaning forward, bouncing around, sometimes maybe a little off model, but strong. That's a strong picture. And the dwarves are just great characters. 7 characters you got to keep straight. You probably can't even remember all their names, but each of them have a different little color palette, a different little detail like a patch or big goofy shoes. Dopey's the only one without a beard, and he's got his giant ears. They all have a slightly different beard shape, except for Happy and Doc. But then you can separate Happy and Doc because of differences in their color and the glasses and the buttons and the belts. It's excellent use of very minimal character design elements to separate all 7 of them. Doc, Dopey, and Grumpy kind of take the center stage as the ones with the most character and development, and then the other 4 are sort of secondary characters who are there and add comedy, but there's this cognizance that you can't follow all 7 of these characters, so we focus on 3 as kind of the most memorable of the dwarves. And then the dwarves try to kill her, and then they see her moving under the bed sheets. And if you're identifying with the dwarves, this is kind of scary and freaky as she's moaning, and it's like a ghost. And then they are about to murder her with a bunch of axes and stuff. And then she wakes up and realizes who they are. And this is the bit that feminists hate: that Snow White agrees to help take care of their house and do domestic services for them. And something I've said in the past that I'm sticking to is that I think feminist critics have a point. Like, Snow White shouldn't be the only type of character that little girls are introduced to. It's okay for little girls to have, heroic female characters who go on adventures, but they never stop at just saying that. It's always everything's problematic, everything's racist, everything's homophobic, and we have to call it all out. We have to have this call-out culture that demands changes to things like this. We got to update Snow White and make her a feminist character where she bosses the dwarves into cleaning up their own dang house. In the context of Snow White's story, this is fair because it's their dang house. She's trespassed because she's sort of an innocent little girl who's still a little bit immature. And because the queen has forced her to do domestic chores, because the queen is cruel, Snow White has gained these domestic skills she normally wouldn't have as a princess, and then she can use it to help the dwarves. It's thematically appropriate in the context of the Snow White story. It's not just some Gender is a social construct, patriarchy teaching girls that they have to be good housewives. It's showing Snow White having a positive character trait in addition to her innocence, which helps her give something back to the dwarves. I keep saying dwarves. It's just Tolkien got that stuck in my head forever, guys. I'm never going to say dwarfs. It doesn't sound right. And the dwarfs are offering her a household and protection, essentially. It's fair. And this is the same thing. So instead of his great rhyme, the master just jaws on and on about how Snow White survived and the queen gets mad. And I'm telling you, like, the Snow White Disney movie, that is some hard-hitting stuff. She eats the apple, and then she starts transforming, and you see her silhouette as she's distorted into this monster, and you see the paint dripping down that creepily painted apple into the shape of a skull, and then it fades to become a beautifully succulent-looking red apple. Holy cats, this movie kicks butt. It's terrifying. It's fantastic. This, too. Let's read this dialogue. It's time to leave. I don't want to keep my princess waiting. Oh, are you thirsty, my little one? Then help yourself. Cackle, cackle. In the movie, it's thirsty? Have a drink. Thirsty, have a drink. 4 words. Boom. Keep your story clicking. And keep your comics adaptation clicking. Your comics adaptation shouldn't be worse paced than the movie that you're working on. At least if you're adapting a movie, you have an idea of the pacing of that movie. Now's your chance to make it even punchier. Now's your chance to even tighten up that movie more and add and pack in more stuff. That's what comics are good for. Packing in is tons and tons and tons of stuff onto a single page or into a couple panels, if that's what you want to do. I guess my criticism of this is the same thing. You can hear in your head the dwarves getting mad and animated as they realize that Snow White is in danger, and then their exclamations are timed with the soundtrack. Dun, 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 the queen, Snow White, let's go. And then the music starts playing and the tension starts building. It's a lot of dialogue back and forth, multiple sentences to get to that realization. They kind of glossed over this. The queen saying, "Now I'm the fairest in the land," is such a key moment. She looks right at the camera. I guess she does here. My victory is complete. They add a lot of extra stuff you don't need. I am the fairest in the land, with one picture of the queen, is all you need, because the child can look at her, look how hideous she is, and realize what an existential evil this queen is. She has destroyed herself in pursuit of Snow White, and with the idea of destroying Snow White out of petty revenge, the queen has lost her own beauty and disfigured herself forever. It's an amazing villainous character. It's primal. It's powerful. Disney kicked... I know that Disney sort of sanitized the Grimm fairy tales, but because they were passionate about their art and the art of animation, their stories still kick butt, and they imply a lot of the bad stuff rather than kind of shove a lot of the scary details in your face like the old Grimm fairy tale stories do. But that doesn't mean they're pulling their punches. She gets hit by lightning, falls off a cliff, and a giant rock falls on her. And they didn't show this in the comic, but then 2 vultures look down at the queen, they smile, and then they just start slowly swooping down. Oh, that's big. That's good storytelling. And then I think in the Grimm's fairy tale, they like encased her in diamond, I think, almost magically, because they're gem workers. And in the movie version, then they kind of just build a little glass case. And the prince comes and rescues Snow White, and she's taken to his castle. And this is a thing where I think the feminist interpretation of these fairy tales misses the Christian subtext to these fairy tales. Snow White died, the prince came and brought her back to life, and she goes to his magical kingdom. So even though this is a fairy story where, oh, she was dead and now she's alive again, ta-da, on one level, this story works as a Christian fable because even though she's dead, there's hope for a character like Snow White because there is the life hereafter with the prince. So it works on that level. It works in the context of the fairy tale because there's an explanation given. She's alive because the apple doesn't kill. It only puts a person into a deep sleep. The the witch, she cackles and she's delighted at the idea that the dwarves are going to bury her alive. And the way she delivers that line, she's chewing on the scenery. It's great. She's so wicked. But then the dwarves don't bury Snow White alive because they admire her beauty and they want that to be preserved. The Snow White story gets at primal ideas of beauty and truth and goodness, and feminists hate it. I love the Snow White story. I love the Grimm version of it. I love the Disney version of it. It kicks so much butt. So I guess I can kind of recommend this comic. I feel like it just didn't live up to everything that's great about the Disney Snow White story. But go watch that again if you haven't. And this has always been my theme. I started by reading a manga. The Twilight Princess Legend of Zelda manga. I thought, man, this is sort of like the Ivanhoe story. And what clicked for me was that the feminist critique of art and fiction is older than Comicsgate. It's older than Gamergate. It's older than you noticing this weird stuff in your comics. And they dislike any story they could interpret as patriarchal or reinforcing traditional gender norms. They make the argument sound convincing by saying, well, little girls, they shouldn't be taught to be like Snow White. They should be taught to be self-reliant. They should be taught to look out for yourself. And I agree. That is a good point. It is good to teach girls not to just wait for Prince Charming to come and rescue them. It's good to teach girls to be able to take care of themselves, to beware of strangers and not trust strangers offering them suspicious apples. In some way, that could be what you could also interpret the Snow White story as, beware of strangers. I hope I didn't show everything. I must have skipped over some stuff, and I was zoomed in a lot. So, but yeah, the story works on so many levels that what has always bothered me is the idea that storytelling and our imaginations must change to be less problematic. It's an attack not just on comics or video games or movies. It's not an attack on a medium. It's an attack on the imagination of the human race and the kind of stories that we resonate with on a personal level. I'm not saying all feminists do this, but the radical Marxist influence feminists who want to change all of culture and are concerned with how culture reinforces certain values. They want to change that because I think they see their set of values in complete opposition to the values of all human history, particularly the white cis heteronormative Christian patriarchy as illustrated in those sort of German Christian folk tales that so influenced Disney animation studios. So I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. I love you guys. Sorry for all the tangents, but I will catch you later.